Hello and welcome to today's bite-size session masterclass coming live from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So welcome, my name is Clare Beynon. I'm the talent acquisition marketing manager for Enterprise, and I would love to welcome you all today and thank you for joining. Wherever you're coming from, we're live streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, I think every single channel possible. So really looking forward to sharing some really good insights today, and I'm being joined by Kirsty McKay. So hi Kirsty.
Hiya, how are you all doing?
We are really good, thank you. It's a beautiful sunny day where I am. I'm coming from Leicestershire, so central England. And Kirsty, where are you coming from today? Where are you?
So Falkirk today. So I've just let the dog out the back and the wind is insane. So my hair is probably all over the place as I've zoomed back up the stair there, but it's a lovely day though.
My dog is also in the garden. Our poor dogs, when we're working from home, they get relegated to the garden. So hopefully we behave. But yes, it's been a bit blowy up in the north of England, hasn't it? So fingers crossed they'll be okay.
Yes, I am sure we will.
Well, thank you so much for joining. And Kirsty, I'm going to share our slides as we start. So we're just waiting for the numbers. The numbers are creeping up today. So thank you so much to those that are joining us. Okay, so what are we going to be covering? So as mentioned, this is another episode in our bite-sized masterclass series designed to help you succeed and transition into the world of work. And we've covered quite a lot, probably over the last 10 weeks, we've covered quite a lot of content from that job application through to how to present yourself on social media. So lots of really great topics that you can go back and can look back on, and soon to be uploaded on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to really focus on the questions that you really should be asking at the end of your job interview. So just some housekeeping before we start. Your microphones and cameras are muted, but we welcome you to use the chat function today, and just post in there any thoughts or comments or questions that you might have throughout today, because I really think this is a really interesting topic. And hopefully, you'll get some good insights. So this is me, lovely. I always love seeing my picture on the screen and myself, so I can see myself twice here. So this is me. So I look after recruitment marketing at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and Kirsty, all the way from Edinburgh Napier University. And what do you do over at Edinburgh Napier, Kirsty?
So I'm the graduate recruitment manager over at Edinburgh Napier. So I sit within our sort of central careers team, but look after our graduate recruitment team. So I look after our final year students and recent graduates and help them to actually go out into the world and find opportunities. So we run sort of an internal recruitment consultancy, and within that we will actively source jobs and come along to events like this to try and help some of our students make sure that they're able to get the jobs that are on offer and available.
Perfect. So we do have an expert in the room today for any questions that you have. So
oh, I don't know about that, but
between the two of us, we're good. We are good. So what are we going to be covering today? What questions should we be asking? But also, how do you follow up after an interview? So really taking this down to the detail and really giving you some great insights and advice from all the experience that Kirsty and I have. So hopefully you'll take something away from this today. So I know I've been in this scenario where I have sat through a job interview as the candidate, and I think I've probably done, pretty okay with answering the questions. And you come to the end of the interview and your interviewer asks, have you got any questions for me? And at that point, you're kind of feeling a little bit relaxed. The interview's done, you know, the main graft of that interview is done. You feel a little bit relaxed in your chair. You're probably kind of thinking, oh goodness, this is going to be over very soon. So I'm really happy about that. But then you get asked that question and all of a sudden, ooh, it's, you know, your mind can go blank. You may have had some questions prepared that you don't have quite to hand. And what do you say? It's a really interesting kind of topic, and we interview lots of candidates at Enterprise, and over the weeks and months, you know, we've really kind of tackled this with our candidates to understand, you know, what kind of questions get asked, what maybe are good questions to ask, and maybe the ones that we would suggest you would or should avoid. It's a really tough one. Have you prepared questions ahead of the interview? So we're just going to give you hopefully some tips on some good ideas. And I'm going to start with really kind of looking at the questions you probably shouldn't ask. So really make sure you really think about what are those maybe topics or areas that you should avoid. So we've got here at the top, well, you've already answered all my questions, so I don't really have anything to ask you. Wow. Now you are still selling yourself during the interview. So this is the best opportunity. And in fact, probably one of the most important sort of times of the interview where you get the opportunity to sell yourself. So certainly advise not to say, don't really have anything, you've answered everything that I've got. So always make sure you've got some questions prepared, or if you haven't got them to hand and you're in the moment, I want you to refer back to this webinar and think about some good ideas of some questions that you can ask. Now I'm going to ask for some interaction at this point for the next two questions you could ask. So we've got, how much is the pay? How much am I going to get paid for this job? And can you just tell me a little bit about the job? So Kirsty, I know you're going to monitor the chat, but for those of you that are online, I just want you to maybe put some thoughts in the chat as to why you think those last two questions might potentially not be great when you're in an interview. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to just put some thoughts and ideas in the chat for me.
We've got a couple of answers coming in just at the side here. So we've got one of our participants who said the second question shows a lack of understanding of the role you've applied to. The last question is not as good because it shows you haven't read about the role and the responsibilities before you actually apply. The other one, you know, maybe infers that you're only bothered about the money and you haven't maybe looked into researching the job enough. They're ones you should probably already know the answer to. We've got another person that said if we ask about pay, it might look like we're more interested in salary than the role. And we've got one more comment just come in there that says the questions about pay maybe sort of infers that you just care more about the pay rather than the job itself. So some good points coming in there.
Amazing. You guys are brilliant. You don't need this webinar. Well done. Yeah, in actual fact, you're absolutely correct. You know, as soon as a candidate asks me those questions, I will 100% think, well, have you not researched the job that you're applying for? Have you spoken to anybody at Enterprise? Have you spoken, we took advantage maybe of our drop-in sessions. We run drop-in sessions every Wednesday actually to all of our candidates in the process to really help support. So really kind of think about, what questions maybe should I avoid that I could have maybe found out through Googling the job or the opportunity. So I think, you're absolutely spot on with your answers.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry, Kirsty.
I was going to say there's one more reflection just come in that makes quite a good point, and I'm sure this is one we'll be going on to discuss, so don't worry, we will definitely cover this. But one's made a point that, the question of pay, so if they don't ask about it at that point of the interview, is there a more appropriate time to ask that question? Because it obviously is an important factor, as much as it might not be the only factor in making your mind up about a job. It is obviously can be quite an important factor for some, but I think we'll perhaps come on to that in a wee few minutes. Yeah.
And that's a great question. And sometimes it's how you ask the question. So this is how much is the pay? But then you might want to dig in maybe at the end of the interview a little bit more into the progression and the opportunities that you may not have found out through some of the sources you have access to. So yeah, it's a really, really good point. And not every employer does publish pay. So, you know, is there any opportunities for you to discover that ahead of your interview? And what stage of the interview are you in? Is it the last stage? Have you had other interviews? So I think, yeah, it's a really, really good point. Okay, so just some other tips I would say in terms of which topics to avoid. I would suggest maybe kind of not going straight in there. We're talking about sort of the off-work activities, so social events, happy hours, you know, maybe kind of think about how that might come across, lunch breaks, you know, it can seem a little bit that you're uninvested in the actual role and being successful in the role. So maybe just be mindful about questions in those sort of what I would say is off-work activities. I would also maybe avoid asking questions about the person that's interviewing you, but about, you know, their personal life. You know, you certainly want to ask about their career and how they've got to the role they've got to today, but, you know, not necessarily, you wouldn't be expected to be asked questions about you personally. You know, I think, you know, just stay off those, you know, type of questions, and, you know, we do get them. I would say some other tips, maybe just keep those questions very simple. So try and avoid really complicated, multifaceted questions that as a recruiter, you know, it might take a long time to really kind of answer if there's many aspects. So really try and keep your questions quite simple too. Anything else, Kirsty, that you can think of in terms of what we should avoid asking?
No, you know, I think you've covered a big majority of them, but I think those ones are absolutely key. You know, keep your questions simple, and think about how you're framing them. You know, this is still an opportunity to sell yourself and to really promote yourself to the employer. So being mindful about not just what you're asking, but how you're asking it. So you can absolutely ask them to explain more about the job role, but just don't word it like that, you know. Try and think about how you can frame that positively, so you're always showing one, that you're capable of doing the job, and two, that you're super keen and super invested in that process as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you're sitting there in the chair, you haven't got your notes to hand, your mind goes blank. So we're going to provide you with 4 tips around asking your interviewer questions, and really kind of the topics that will go down really well in an interview, and really kind of put you in a really good light with the person interviewing you. So we've called it the 4 C's of questioning, and we've got connect, culture, challenges, and close. So really kind of 4 C's here around you know, how are you going to really present yourself in the best light possible at the end of an interview. So connecting with the interviewer. So like I mentioned already, you'll find to ask questions about the interviewer, about their career history, about, you know, just a little bit of insight that might give you some help in terms of the culture and the background of the organisation. And I know that when I'm interviewing, I do like to talk about myself. So, you know, it's a really nice opportunity to get the person interviewing you to really kind of explain a little bit more about them. And that's always a great question to ask. Culture, and so when we talk about how the employees are rewarded, it's really thinking about the values of the organisation. And, you know, when we say rewarded, you know, not to get confused necessarily sometimes with pay. But so, for example, at Enterprise, we pay our employees to take time off to give back to their local community. And that's just a great benefit that we offer. So you may be able to find out and think about kind of questions around culture. So tell me a little bit about the culture of the company, you know, really looked at your values, and they do align to my values. I'd like to maybe dig into the one specific value, and it just shows that you've done your brilliant research. Challenges are really good. So the organisation you're interviewing with will be operating within a particular industry. So really think about some of the challenges that the organisation are facing, and even better, how you can add value to those challenges. And that gives you your opportunity to kind of then sell yourself again. And then close. we always recommend a close at the end of an interview. So is there any reservations that you have? Is there anything more that I'd like, I can tell you, or anything more about me you'd like to know? So really kind of, if you can ask a couple of questions that will kind of tick these off, I think you'll put yourself in a really good position. So anything to add, Kirsty, on those 4 points?
No, I think you've covered it all absolutely brilliantly. I really like how, thinking about it in terms of the 4 C's, to give yourself that wee reminder on the day of, if your mind does go blank, you kind of think about one of those areas and particularly dig into that is fab. Yeah, so not much to add for me.
4 C's, have them to mind. So if you haven't got anything to hand, you can always think about asking questions around these, and are really good questions or areas to stick to. And then we've got a real golden question to share with you. So really looking at that, the point that we mentioned around the industry and the challenges that the industry is facing. I mean, look, what a great question this is. Talk to me about the company's biggest threat to your success this year, and how can I help to overcome this in my role? I mean, that's an amazing question, and a golden question that if you ask that, certainly the interviewer is going to be thinking, wow, that's like pretty amazing. And as they answer that question, this gives you an opportunity to sort of resell the skills that you have to be able to help the organization overcome those challenges in the future. So yeah, just note that down, have it. I just think it's an amazing question that would really impress the interviewer. I think that's a real good one. So you've been in the interview, you've took our advice, you've thought about the questions to avoid, you've thought about the 4 C's and think, really crafted some questions around those 4 C's, and you've used the golden question, and the interview now comes to a close. You're happy it's done, you're happy hopefully how it's gone, you leave the interview. But I really want to make sure that we don't underestimate the power and the importance of following up after an interview. And in fact, probably for every 20 interviews that we do, we probably find that 1 candidate will follow up after the interview. So if you really want to, again, make sure that you stand out from the crowd, this is a really great way to really connect with your recruiter. And we really recommend that probably no more than 48 hours after the interview that you will follow up. And that will typically be on an email. And it will be, thank you so much for the interview. It's really insightful. I've learned a lot. And, you may, we'll give you maybe some different tips, and Kirsty might have some in terms of maybe what to mention in the follow-up email. But what I would also say, it's a great opportunity to think about the interview you've had. So time to reflect back on the day before. Maybe there were some questions that you struggled with, or thought maybe you didn't get the point across as much as you would like. The interview is not over. You have an opportunity then to maybe point out some of the skills or the qualifications that you didn't really or feel you didn't really bring that across on the day of the interview, that you may want to put in your follow-up email. And we do have a template one that we can share with you. But I think it's just common courtesy really to send that thank you email. What do you think, Kirsty, in terms of that follow-up piece with your recruiter?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, when I was in more of a commercial facing recruitment role, it was something that always made a good candidate a great candidate, and it made them stand out to you. And like you say, not everyone follows up. So by crafting just a wee short, nicely written email that just reflects, that you're grateful for the opportunity, you're really interested in the role, thank you for your time, etc. Here's a few things I wanted to follow up with. It doesn't just show, how keen you are, but also it helps the employer place you in a role in their organisation, and thinking, well, if that person worked with me, they're going to exhibit these behaviours, are going to be this courteous, are going to have this fab way of following up with people. And for a role potentially like one that you might be joining with enterprise, it's quite focused on stakeholder engagement and that communications piece, it's a brilliant way to really showcase that skill set. So would highly recommend following up after every interview that you have.
Brilliant. And you want to be that 1 in 20 that really stands out. And again, if there's something you failed to mention or forgot to mention, this is your golden opportunity to be able to do that. So really be mindful about what is your plan post-interview. And like Kirsty said, just keep it really simple. You know, a recruiter doesn't want to read a 2-page document. They don't want to interview you all over again, but just something very concise that you can share that would work. And here's a bit of a useful template that I can share with you. So this is just a suggestion. Again, you can take this as a template, you can tweak it, but it's, you know, so, you know, thanking the interviewer, the recruiter for their time, which I think goes a long way. So that's really lovely to start the message with a thank you. You know, I loved hearing about whatever the topic is or whatever you spoke about, and I was particularly impressed with and, you know, make sure that they understand now that you're really eager to work for that organisation. You really feel that you're the right fit. You know, it reinforced the fact that you wanted to join the organisation, and this is how I feel that I can help you achieve those goals, and we can work really well together in the future. So you can take that away. You may be able to tweak it slightly, but again, that is certainly, if you speak to any recruiter, will make you stand out from the next candidate. So you need to be able to do everything that you can in your power to be successful, and this is a great way to do that. So I think that's quite a nice little note. I'd be really happy to receive that, Kirsty.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a question come in actually that links really well into this template, and it's a question that asks, you know, how many times should I follow up with the interviewer after an interview? And I think my advice would be probably just the once would be appropriate. I mean, unless it goes weeks and weeks between you having the interview and hearing about it, I think just the once is probably the appropriate amount of times to do that. So make sure when you do have that follow up and you do have that one chance to follow up, that you make the most of it and you use a template like this, or use a really positive message like this that's on the screen there just now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think once is fine. I think don't panic if you don't hear back or the recruiter doesn't reply to every message. They definitely will have received it and it will have been noted. So yeah, that's a really good point. And actually during your interview you might find out when you might hear back. So at least then you're not having to kind of keep sort of following up with the company to kind of ask when that will be. So this is a really nice template to use. Great question. Perfect. Okay, well, we kind of feels like we've whizzed through some of our top tips here. I'm going to stop sharing screen so we can kind of ask any questions you've got on this topic. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. You can connect with us over at Enterprise on all the different channels that we're on and we're streaming on today. So please do that. You can connect with myself or Kirsty on LinkedIn for any specific questions after today. We're more than happy to take those and we will certainly respond. But this is your time now. We've got probably just over about 7 minutes all in all.
And we've had our first question come in as well, which is brilliant. So we've got a question here coming in from someone who's watching our live stream on LinkedIn. So hello. And they've actually got an interview with Enterprise coming up tomorrow, which is super exciting. So really timely that they're on this meeting today as well. And they're just wondering about the follow-up interview. So should they be emailing the recruiter ahead of that follow-up interview? Or yeah, what would your advice there be, Claire?
So yeah, so we have sort of 2 main stages of our process. So with the recruiter interview and then the branch placement or visit that you will go, which is the final stage. So yeah, so I would say certainly follow up with your recruiter. Take all the great advice that we've just given you in terms of questions to ask. So hopefully you've looked at our website to get we've got some great blogs on the website just to give you a little bit more insight into the organisation and our culture. And certainly a follow-up email 24 hours after your interview, or within that 24 hours, I think will go a long way. So best of luck. We are doing Wednesday night drop-in sessions too that you should be invited to. although that will be after your interview. But I can send some recordings if you want to connect with me. I can send a recording today that might help you for your interview tomorrow. So best of luck. Great question.
Amazing, and best of luck to you. That's really exciting that you've got that coming up tomorrow. So we've had another question in, and that's just asking whether it would be okay to ask at the end of your interview when you'll hear back from an interviewer if they haven't said so already. But yeah, I think absolutely. I think it shows if they've perhaps it's maybe just slipped their mind to mention it, or they're maybe planning on mentioning it just after the question section, but it doesn't ever hurt to ask, you know, what's the next stage in this process, or what would your steer on that be, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. Every organisation has a different process, and sometimes you can't always find that out online. So I would certainly, I think it just shows how keen you are to hear back. So yeah, I think if you don't ask that question, you don't receive that information, it's a real long waiting game then. And I just think it, like you say, sometimes most recruiters will endeavour to give you that information, but I think if you kind of ask that, it kind of shows how keen you are to hear back and understand the next step. So I think it's a great question to ask.
Amazing. And I think we've got one final question that's come in just at the bottom there, and that's asking if it's okay to connect with your recruiter on LinkedIn and if you can follow up with them on there. And I think it's always a good idea to have a look at someone's LinkedIn page. It's absolutely what it's there for. If appropriate, if you have had that relationship with that recruiter, absolutely do connect with them. In terms of follow-up, my steer on that would always be to go with the method of communication that the recruiter has suggested. So if you've been corresponding with them via email, stick to that. However, if they're open to speaking to you on LinkedIn, there's absolutely no problem with you reaching out in that capacity at all.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And we use LinkedIn a lot at Enterprise, and we like to share and post sort of recent activity. And I think it's a great way you can learn about an organisation through what gets posted through LinkedIn. So absolutely, we're very happy to have you follow us, but maybe sort of if you are in a process, like Kirsty said in an interview, probably stick with the method that you're already communicating with, which would typically be through email probably.
Yeah,
so, really good.
And another question that's just zoomed in here is if they're wanting to connect with the interviewer, should they actually ask to have their email address at the end of the interview, or how would they go about getting their email? So where it's a personal email address, you maybe won't always get that from the recruiter, and that's purely because recruiters will deal with hundreds and hundreds of candidates. So you can imagine if you have every single candidate getting in touch with you, it doesn't make a great experience for the candidate, and we want to make sure that we're getting back to them and providing the utmost up-to-date and relevant information. What I would say in that situation is do take a look at any generic email addresses that you've been given for that particular recruitment team or for that particular HR team that you are dealing with. I'm not sure if that's a process or a similar process that you have over at Enterprise, though, Claire.
Yeah, to get to the point, if you've had an interview, you should hopefully have some kind of way or method to communicate with the recruiter. They would have probably emailed you about your interview, so I would just respond to those addresses. So yeah, you should, if I mean, I think you're fine to, if you don't have that information and you want to, it's finding out from a recruiter, how am I best to connect with you if I have a question, and maybe ask the question. But it's a, you know, it's a good point. Yeah, really good question. Right, we've got one from LinkedIn as well. I can see it now, Kirsty, so I'll
amazing.
if I feel can correcting my answer at the end of the interview or in between, or even if I can correct it in between. Not sure if I think the question around correcting is absolutely fine. If you feel that you've not answered the question maybe as well, or asked a question to your interviewer that you think you could have done maybe a better version, or gone down a different path, then 100% you can say, look, can I just correct what I've just said and just clarify what I'm asking? I think that's absolutely fine. So wow, so we've had some really great questions, so thank you. Really appreciate your time today. next week, not to be missed, we're going to do a bite-sized webinar session on the virtual assessment centre. So if any of you have or will have some possibilities of attending an assessment centre and it's virtual in the future, my colleague Jamie Wharf will be hosting that session, same time next week. As a reminder, if you are interested in our opportunities at Enterprise, please join and visit our website, careers.enterprise.co.uk. You can find out loads of information about all the different opportunities we are hiring right now, and also for our placement opportunities. Big thank you to Kirsty for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and value, and honestly some great insights, Kirsty. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice to see everyone on the call today.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Brilliant. Take care. Bye.